Welcome to a Talk Tools webinar. Today's presentation is Neuroplasticity, How We Change the Brain with instructor Colette Ellis. So before we get things started, just a few things I'd like to point out to you. First, we'd like to thank you for choosing Talk Tools for your continuing education. Our mission is improving the life for those with disabilities, and we've been able to do that for over 100,000 people around the world due to your support and the work that you do. So thank you so much for choosing Talk Tools. Now, if this is your first Talk Tools webinar, there are a couple of tabs on your webinar control panel that I'd like to point out to you. There's a place for you to ask questions for our instructor. It's called the Questions tab. Should be located on your control panel along with the Handouts tab. So you should be able to download a PDF file of today's presentation along with a one-sheet additional resource. Now, just to make sure everything's functioning properly, I am going to ask you the following question. Can you see me, hear me, and see my screen? Please answer yes or no. Give everyone a few seconds to get their answers in, but it looks like 100% are saying yes, so everything appears to be functioning properly. And what should you expect when the webinar is over? Anyone who registers for today's webinar will receive an email within 1 to 3 business days of today with including in the email is a link to today's recording so you can watch it again. Please keep in mind that all Talk Tools webinars have an expiration of 30 days after the live broadcast date, so please keep that in mind. Also, in this email is your digital copy of your certificate, the ASHA CEU survey. If anyone has an ASHA number and you would like us to report your number to ASHA, it's extremely important that you fill out this survey. It is the only way we know you have an ASHA number. And of course, we're given deadlines to file for all of our courses. So if you submit your survey after the deadline, we cannot report credit for you for this class. So super important to fill out that survey as soon as possible. If anyone has any questions about our ASHA policy, or if you have not received this email within 1 to 3 business days, please contact us directly at continuingeducation@talktools.com. All right, Colette, I'm going to switch screens with you now.
All righty. All right. I cannot see myself, Lisa, so can you see me?
I can see you, and I can see your screen.
Okay. I frankly don't know how to get my view of myself in that little box, but that's okay. I do better when I don't see myself. So, oh, wait, there I am. Okay. All right. So, time for me to take it away?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I sure appreciate all of you in attendance and those that may see it after the fact. This was a really fun topic to research. Neuroplasticity. We've heard that buzzword come around the block for several years now, but as we see how it can apply to our clients, whether you're in a speech path, an OT, PT, a parent, it's really interesting how it affects us on a daily basis, and the more we understand of how we truly can change the brain, we have definitely the most wonderful job there is out there. So I hope this sheds some light on this topic of neuroplasticity and how it can help all of us as working therapists, including parents, because believe it or not, you are therapists as well. So let's take it away. So again, my name is Colette Ellis. I'm a board certified specialist in swallowing and swallowing disorders and also a lecturer for Talk Tools. So I do have to Okay, why is my slide not advancing? Well, there we go. I have to go over my financial disclosures. I am the owner of 29th Street Therapy Center in Chickasha, Oklahoma, and the owner of Advanced Dysphagia Diagnostics, which is a mobile fiber optic endoscopic evaluation of swallowing company. Because voice and swallowing is my area of expertise, but I'm also a member of the Talk Tools Speaker Bureau, for which I receive honorarium and teach classes for them, both in the US and around the world. I do not have any other non-financial disclosures to reveal, however. So I hope to cover these learning objectives to understand again how neuroplasticity is defined and the current perspectives on neuroplasticity and how it affects therapeutic treatment and learning in general, how it can change with age, and I hope that you can gain at least 4 benefits for identifying ways to improve neuroplastic changes in our clients, and then 4 examples of how to rewire the brain via neuroplasticity. Hopefully you'll learn more than that, but these are some of the objectives I hope to achieve today. So let's get started. What is in a name? Well, according to Shaw and McKeown, they write that there's 2 main current perspectives on neuroplasticity. One is that it's a fundamental process that describes any change in final neural activity or behavioral response. But really, neuroplasticity is an umbrella term for a vast collection of different brain changes and adaptation phenomena. Our brains are truly extraordinary. It's a truly extraordinary organ. Unlike computers, which are built with certain specifications, and computers receive software updates regularly, our brains are actually able to receive hardware updates in addition to software updates, because we have different pathways that form and fall dormant depending on their use. They are created or discarded according to our experiences. So basically, everything we're exposed to in life shapes what we begin to become good at or what we begin to prune away. When we learn something new, we create new connections between our neurons, and we rewire our brains to adapt to new circumstances. And this basically happens on a daily basis, but it's also something that we can encourage and stimulate. And as therapists and parents out there, this is what I want to bring home and help to show, because this is how we truly can make a difference in our own areas of expertise in our own communities around the world. So this should be very encouraging to us as therapists, because it's so critically important to understand. So how does this work? Well, we know we have neurons and synapses, and all these connections strengthen or prune away across our lifetime. But in reality, we know that some physicians use medications and chemicals within our brain to make things work. And certainly the science of psychology has certainly put forth a lot of effort to change the way the brain works by modifying thought patterns. But if we really want to make a permanent and significant change in our brain structure and the way it functions, we have to think about our everyday simple activities, and this is how learning comes in. So when we think about neuroplasticity and learning, the relationship is an easy one to surmise. When we learn, we form a new pathway in the brain. Each lesson that we learn, no matter what it is, whether it's task analyzed in a step-by-step process, it has a potential to connect new neurons and change our brain in a default mode of operation. Of course, not all learning is created equal, and learning new facts doesn't necessarily take advantage of the amazing neuroplasticity that happens in our brain. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but for example, learning a new language or learning a musical instrument certainly does. It's through this sort of learning that we may be able to figure out how to purposefully rewire the brain. And this is important, critically important, when there's an injury to the brain or when we already have difficulties such as a child born with some neurodevelopmental delays or some sort of diagnosis that is preventing some of the normal neurotypical development to happen in the first place. So the extent to which we apply our brain's near magical abilities is also dependent on how we invest and promote neuroplastic change and how we approach it in general. There's lots of keys to this. So how we shape our life to create our best brain. Well, have you ever watched those specials on PBS or some of those medical shows that relate to someone's experience after recovery, after some sort of traumatic injury or traumatic brain injury, a stroke, or some other debilitating illness? It almost seems like their recovery was magical. And it wasn't magical. They, I'm sure, had lots and lots of struggles. However, sometimes there's some inexplicable improvements that science used to not be able to explain. And the magic behind that is now called neuroplasticity. So I think I've known this as a therapist, being in the field as long as I have. Before this term was common knowledge, we would see changes through our repetitive tasks, through our abilities to do one-on-one therapy, and be really close with interacting with a parent or with interacting with a child when there was good follow-through at home. People would say, well, how did you get them to do that? Well, it was a lot of hard work and it was a lot of repetitions. So as therapists, we see firsthand how direct one-on-one interactions affect change. But can this be improved upon or enhanced? Well, yes, it certainly can. And that's how neuroplasticity works. The more we can aid in effective positive change, the more we can improve our outcomes and our goals. I think one of the first times I first had an aha moment about this was working even before the word neuroplasticity was common knowledge, was working with a child that came to me post a complete right hemispherectomy. The seizure syndrome that this young child was experiencing was so severe that they had to remove a whole hemisphere or half hemisphere of the brain, or excuse me, hemisphere, one side. And basically, after the initial post-surgery recovery, the opposite hemisphere began to teach that brain how to do the things it had lost: speech, walking, feeding themselves, etc. And the first time I saw an MRI and or a CAT scan of the brain when half of it is missing, it's pretty shocking to you as a therapist, and I'm sure it was to the family as well. But when you start to see these connections happen, when half of the brain is gone, you begin to see how just miraculous our brain truly is and truly can be. So we need to understand that neuroplasticity refers to the brain's ability to adapt. It refers to the physiological changes in the brain that happens as a result of our interactions in our own environment. So from the time the brain begins to develop in utero to the time we die, the connections among the cells in our brain recognize in response to our changing needs. So this dynamic process allows us to learn from and adapt to different experiences. And that's a quote from Celeste Campbell from an article in Brainline in 2009. But let's look at these 7 principles of neuroplasticity. And I tell you, when I have an older child, for example, that's come to me because because of they were neurotypical and then they had a TBI. Or I had a few years back a 16-year-old that had a stroke after getting a hard what I want to say, football hit to the chest, which gave him a clot to the heart, which through to the brain, and he ended up having a stroke and a moderately severe Broca's aphasia with apraxia. So we're seeing all kinds of clients these days that have etiologies that you think, oh, they're going to have such a time to come back. Well, that young man did have a severe disability and consequence to his stroke. However, he made some really marvelous recovery, and it was because of these neuroplastic changes. And so let's look at them, because the more you can understand them and explain to your older children that have the ability to understand them. I think they need to know this. With my adults, I explain these 7 principles to them, especially if they are so frustrated and are having such a problem, they get stuck in one area or the other. They want to be all the way to the fluent speech level, and that would be transference, and we still are down at the beginning level of use it or lose it. So if I explain to them what they need to do, they have a better comprehension of either how long it's going to take or how hard the work is going to need to be to get to that area of where they want to be more functional. So let's look at the first principle, and that is use it or lose it. So if certain areas of the brain are not biologically active, they begin to degrade. So that includes use. Okay. When I think about rehabilitating a swallow, for example, there's one protocol that I'm certified in called the McNeil Dysphagia Therapy Protocol, which I hate to say it's secretive, but kind of like Lee Silverman voice protocol, you have to go through these certifications, in other words, to keep the protocols pristine and done correctly. There is a certain pattern of how you teach it and instruct it. But the bottom line is there has to be multiple repetitions to get the brain to get the idea, that's what you want. Okay, I have to do it this many times. So in the McNeil Dysphagia Therapy Protocol, our goal is to get, for example, swallowing is the best exercise for rehabilitating swallowing. Our goal is between 100 or 80 and 100 swallows per session, and that is to carry over at home in their homework sessions too. So that use or repetition is where we have to drive home the point. So think about those of you that know the Talk Tools hierarchies. What do? We have a criteria for success. Let's think about the horn hierarchy. We have multiple horns that do different areas of difficulty because of mouth shape, and the repetitions are 1 to 25. When you can get 25 with correct posturing, you're guaranteed 1 of the next more difficult horn. So again, these are repetitions, use, repetitiveness, and that's the first principle of neuroplasticity. Use it or lose it. If you do not create the repetitions you need, that activity may degrade, no matter what it is. All right, moving on to the next principle, it's repetition. Use it repeatedly. If certain brain areas are not biologically active frequently, they may begin to degrade. Well, think about the importance of follow through with homework. Every Talk Tools hierarchy is recommended to be followed through upon for potentially 3 times a week at 20 minutes, or you may be spinning your proverbial wheels. So not only use it often, but use it repeatedly. So I always assign homework, whether my clients are very young and it's the parents that are stimulating their children to do the repetitive task, or if it's my adult aphasic or someone, my adult with aphasia, or my individual that has apraxia of speech. it's the repetition and the frequency of it that is going to begin to get change within the brain. Now, the next one is intensity. If certain areas, we need to use it intensely. If certain areas of the brain are not used beyond typical activity, they may remain stagnant. I can put this in a typical example of one patient that I've had recently who got stuck in a perseveration loop on a certain set of speech sounds and speech words. He couldn't get it past the 1 and 2 word phrase level because of his severe aphasia. Well, intensely, I had to have a heart-to-heart with the family because they were not practicing and they were not using his abilities beyond typical activity, which was only participating in therapy when he was with me. It has to be beyond typical activity, beyond just a little bit of practice time. It has to be used intensely, repeated, and often. So it's critically important when children and or adults are attending therapy that you have a good source or a team of players that will help follow through. And certainly if you have PTOT speech then that can collaborate and repeat on each other's goals, that just helps solidify these principles of not only repetition but intensity, because there's some crossover, and this certainly helps the end goal of use it intensely. In the area of voice, for example, with Lee Silverman voice protocol, our voice is not just to be say ah and extend the vocal mechanism, but it's to be loud and long. Use it with intent, use it loud and long. And for someone, for example, with Parkinson's disease, this does not seem typical. They seem like they believe that they're screaming, and we have to convince them, no, you're not screaming. You're using it loud and long will make it seem like a more normal voice. And over time, over these sessions that we're going to train you to do this, you're going to come up with a more normal voice instead of a soft, whispered, muttered voice, which is why you came to me in the first place. The next one is specificity. If certain areas of the brain are not used for a specific task, performance of that specific task might not improve. So no matter what the task is, it has to involve what you're specifically trying to teach. If it's handwriting, you need to practice handwriting. If it's voice quality and loudness, you need to practice voice. If it's swallowing, the best exercise for swallowing is swallowing. So use it with specificity. So applying this to your goals when creating your goals is very important, because it has to transfer over eventually. So it has to be specific to what you're trying to teach. And then moving on to salience. This is probably where I see some breakdown and have to teach graduate students, those that rotate to us through our universities. But what that means, use it with attention. If certain brain areas are not motivated or heightened during a specific task, performance of that task might not improve. In other words, I have sat in and observed therapy where I know the therapist was bored. So if the therapist was bored, by golly, that child or that client was bored as well. So it needs to be engaging and motivating, and that individual needs to participate with attention, and that creates salience, which will help push it towards the rest of the neuroplastic goals to get it past transference. So then we have difficulty. We have to use it and challenge it. If certain brain areas are not challenged during a specific task, the performance of that specific task might not be improved. Well, what do I mean by that? Think of it all the way back to exercise physiology. If I am trying to make my arms not so flabby in the wind, and I'm trying to, for example, make my bicep a little bit larger, the trainer might start me on a 3-pound weight. And after the first week, I might be pretty good at 2 sets of 10 repetitions with that 3-pound weight. But if I stayed at that at 3 months and 6 months and 10 months, I have not challenged that bicep muscle anymore. I have not used it and challenged it to work harder. So I need to move up to 5 pounds. So a 5-pound weight at 10 repetitions, 2 sets, 3 times a week, maybe that's what I need to do next. And then 10 pounds and 15 and so on. So when you think about other areas that you're trying to teach, for example, thinking on my current case I have right now of a severe individual with aphasia and Broca's aphasia and apraxia of speech. After we have gotten one-word level utterances, then I have to string 2. That's a challenge. And now I have to get him to go from reading, which is a better avenue for him, to visually looking at me and saying it, and then saying it again, and then repeating it, and using it intensely and specific, and then making it functional, and then maybe making the word combination is more difficult. Instead of saying a phrase that has the PB&M, which may be very easy for him to say, maybe I need to have co-articulated sounds, STR or SH, CH, ZH combinations that will definitely be more challenging just because of the transitions within the mouth. So you have to think of ways to make your next task more challenging after salience. And then ultimately, we are working towards transference. Use it in different ways. If certain brain areas become plastic, they may begin to transfer and generalize. Our brain is very plastic. Our brain can change even after injury, even after initial trauma at birth. So if it transfers and generalizes, then maybe other behaviors, tasks, or domains will take over and make this more of an easy thing to take into everyday daily life. So think about swallowing. If I get someone through the McNeil Dysphagia Therapy Program in my treatment room, then I'm going to take them to the cafeteria, and then maybe I'll invite them to lunch at a local restaurant and not only have them order and prepare how to pay for it, but then take them to the table and then we'll enjoy the meal together. So the skills that we learned in the treatment room will transfer and generalize over. And again, this works for no matter what you're trying to do across physical, occupational, speech, and or other general learning tasks. So I hope that helps all of you out there listening to understand the 7 principles. And that's why I tend to have this laminated as a page that I can go through and teach my probably as young as I've taught it is probably a 9-year-old up, but even maybe a pretty sharp 8-year-old can understand this, and certainly a teenager or an adult can understand these principles. Because when you get stuck in, it's too hard, I don't get it, I can't do this, that is someone that is falling into a pit, and it's our jobs to get them out of that pit, help them climb out and realize they can do it. Okay, so because we have sometimes compensatory strategies, and just thinking like in the swallowing and feeding world, I can think of something called a typical one. Those of you that work with swallowing or in the adult world, the effortful swallow was created as a compensatory strategy to help someone limp through until either by spontaneous recovery or through generalized improvement, their swallow got better. But actually, effortful swallow combined as an exercise with learning, habilitation can become a rehabilitative act or a habilitated act if they've never been able to get a good swallow by incorporating the principles of neuroplasticity. So sometimes what we use as a crutch can be transferred into a true activity that becomes a rehabilitative task. So now I need to let all of you know in Cyberland that failure is a good thing. What? What do I mean by that? Well, um, I'm a grandmother. I've raised two sons, and I've seen the ebb and flow of the little leagues, the organized soccer, and the karate, and all the different things you take your kids to for sports. But there was a period of time that, especially with little boys, oh, you fell down, get up, you're okay. I was the mom that said, "Are you sure you're sick?" I would send him to school, and then they'd call me, "Yes, he's sick. He's got a fever." But what I'm leading to is sometimes we can not allow our children to fail, or everyone is always a winner at the t-ball game, and there are no losers in the season. And then that's not such a good thing, because we're not teaching our kids the difference between there are always going to be losers and there's always going to be winners. And I don't mean that just in the fact of winning's good, failing's bad. No, failure in the sense that it's a first attempt in learning. So that's an acronym, FAIL, first attempt in learning. So if you're not good at it, you're not good at it yet, simply to saying it that way. Because here's the thing, look, think of our developmental milestones. A baby, for example, just first learning to separate the head from the body. How many times are they pushing up, lifting up, and their head planting down on the ground? Now, each time they're doing that, they're learning, oh, I'm seeing something over here. I'm going to lift my head up. But then, bam, their head goes down because of lack of strength or lack of coordination. Well, they're not, and as parents, we're not saying, oh, you failed again, oh, you failed. No, we just know they need that repetition to get strength in their arms and their shoulder girdle and in their tummy core, so that they begin to coordinate that movement pattern to get their head up, to look around. It's so important that we encourage tummy time in our babies. Same thing with a toddler that's learning to take those full first steps. They've got to learn to crawl and pull themselves up. Well, how many times did they fall over in that attempt, or get frustrated and fall down on their little seats? And then they get frustrated, and then we try and help them up, saying, it's okay. We're not saying, oh, you failed, you failed. No, no. We're like, okay, do it again, do it again. Without saying it, we're encouraging these neuroplastic tendencies. But once we get to the idea of school or a sport or something that gets hard, we tend to attach this idea of good and bad, failure, non-failure, winning and failure, those types of words that may not be the right idea. But I say, and I'm not the only one, research says this too, we need to teach our kids that failure is okay. And I teach it to my adults as well, especially when I see huge levels of frustration when they cannot talk, or someone that comes to me with a tummy tube and they cannot eat, and they've just come off of a trach and they are just learning to reuse their upper airway. They're very frustrated. They've had a life-changing situation come across their everyday life that has been devastating. So yes, they're going to fail. They're going to fail a lot. They're going to have problems until they get the brain to reorganize and improve a skill. So think about everything that we do comes from failing over and over, or repeating something over and over. So it's okay. The difference in neuroplasticity between kids and adults, kids can grasp and learn and improve faster. Certainly teenagers faster than young adults, and young adults faster than geriatrics. But all individuals can change and improve through these neuroplastic characteristics when followed, and when certainly used to their best enhanced abilities. So when we think about neuroplasticity with kids, they're constantly growing, they're constantly developing. We're looking for all these normal neurodevelopmental changes, neurotypical changes, but every experience is promoting a positive change in the brain or a function or both. Because at birth, infants have a brain that has about 7,500 connections with other neurons. By age 2, the brain's neurons have more than doubled the average number of connections, for example, in the same adult brain. That's research from Mundar in 2005. These connections are slowly pruned away as a child grows up, because of certain things that we begin to develop that we need to be good at depending on their environment. Let me give a quick example here. If I grow up in Minnesota and I live on a farm that has a lake, and every winter that lake freezes, I'm going to have the ability to learn to ice skate and probably involved in team hockey at school because that is something that's very prevalent in that area. So my brain's not going to trim away the ability to learn how to ice skate and be on those wobbly structures because I'm going to be exposed to it a lot. But if I go to visit my cousin in North Dakota that has that frozen over lake, and I put on ice skates for the first time, I don't have that skill. I've not had that neurodevelopmental being on ice skates since I was 2 years old. And it's going to be very difficult, and I'm going to fall a lot, and it's not going to be very easy for me to learn, and I may be frustrated, and I may fall down and bust my britches, and I may not like it, and I may move back to or come back to Oklahoma after Christmas break, and then I didn't even have ice skates because I borrowed my cousin's, and I get home and I prune away what little ability and skill that I gained while I was there. Why? Because I don't need it. I'm not going to put on skates. I'm not going to do it again. However, my skill is maybe getting on the skateboard. And I use that analogy because of my own sons. They were superior with skateboards, on and off the driveway, on and off the sidewalk, going on and off of ramps. Why? Because their exposure for that and their multiple repetitions of doing that skill. Yes, they fell. Yes, they skinned their knees. Yes, they bruised their hips from falling, but they didn't prune away that skill, and they both can do that very skillfully now as adult males because it stuck. That skill did not prune away. So, moving on from this slide, I want to next talk about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And this is something I think is very, very important to teach our children. There's a wonderful, you can blog this or look it up, biglifejournal.com. They have some posters that you can trim and laminate, and I got some wonderful ideas from them as well. But the idea behind growth mindset and neuroplasticity is pretty similar. The connection between growth mindset and neuroplasticity in general is important. They mirror each other in concepts. Growth mindset is a mindset that your own innate skills and talents and abilities can be developed or improved upon with determination, while neuroplasticity refers to the brain's ability to adapt and develop beyond the usual developmental period of childhood. We used to only think children had that neuroplastic tendencies in the brain, but now we know, of course, that adults do too. On the contrast, fixed mindset would refer to a person that doesn't believe they can change. It's too hard. I can't do this. And is more resistant to change and stays in fixed patterns. So it's very much encouraging to teach your children to have a growth mindset, because a person with a growth mindset believes he or she can get smarter and better or more skilled through sustained effort. Therefore, failure, falling down, making a bad grade, not getting the first mathematic problem, even though it's been explained to you 10 times, won't devastate them as much as someone that has a fixed mindset. So this sustained effort, this I think I can, I know I can attitude is super important to teach our kids. So you might say that having a growth mindset simply is accepting the idea of neuroplasticity on a broad area or a broad level. So what kind of growth mindset do you have? Think of this as an adult. After making a mistake, children with a growth mindset show a larger brain response than those with fixed mindsets, and that's been proven through fMRI studies. So a growth mindset would have the attitude of, I can learn anything I want to. When I'm frustrated, I'll persevere. I want to challenge myself. When I fail, regardless, I'm learning. Tell me and I'll try hard. If you succeed, I'm inspired. In other words, if they see you succeed, they'll be inspired. And my efforts and attitude determine everything. That's what we need to instill in our patients and our children. Whereas the fixed mindset can be, I'm either good at it or I'm not, period, no change. When I'm frustrated, I give up. I don't like to be challenged. When I fail, that means I'm no good. You tell me I'm smart, but then I'm relying on you to believe that. If you succeed, I feel threatened. In other words, if I see someone else succeed, it threatens me. That's a fixed mindset. My abilities determine everything. So in other words, what my ability, whether I'm good or whether I don't think I'm good, that can make such a difference on breaking someone, because if they believe that they can do something and they truly cannot yet, but they have that fixed mindset, then it can be devastating to their belief about themselves, about getting better, or about improvement. So I want to tell you about, you have power, and you need to teach your clients and children this. And certainly those of us that work with children on the spectrum, children with neurodevelopmental difficulties, those with cerebral palsy or Down syndrome, we have to teach them about the power of yet. I would love to have a little superhuman flying through the air with a cape on that is holding the sign yet. I can't do it yet. I can't write my name yet. I'm unable to tie my shoes yet. I can't read yet. I can't fix dinner yet. I can't swallow yet. So that opens the door to let someone know this moment in time, it may be difficult, but yet is a state of being. It's a power over mind over matter. I will be able to do it. I just can't do it yet. I will give it a go. I will keep trying no matter what, because yet is achievable. So we need to let failure happen. So challenging experiences are a part of life, and as much as we want to shield our own children from things that happen, they need to experience that life has ups and downs. The only way we develop certain coping skills and problem-solving skills are to allow our children to fail, to fall down. If we always shield our children from adversity, regardless of their abilities, key brain connections cannot develop. I need to say that again. Even those with special needs, if you always are shielding them from adversity, the key connections will not develop. So there's ways to handle that. There's ways to muddle through it, and let's talk a little bit more about that. So we need to embrace and celebrate failure. That sounds ridiculous, but let's think about it. You need to give children and our clients, when I say children, I mean our clients and I mean our patients, You need to give them an opportunity to talk about or brag about their mistakes. Well, what happened just then? What was that? You can't always say, good job. Ooh, almost. Ooh, yeah. Uh-huh. You need to let them know, nope, that was not right. And here's some ideas. Maybe create a Family Failure Friday where you can openly discuss, well, yeah, at work I did this and my boss came to me and showed me how I did that, and oopsie, because kids need to see that even you as an adult, which they idolize us, you know that you have problems and you make mistakes too. But you need to openly discuss that mistakes can be made at any age and it's okay. Again, remember that acronym, first attempt at learning, fail. So whether it's high fives, whether it's discussing it or recognizing that, oh, I bet next time will be better, next time will be easier, embrace and celebrate that. Everything is not rosy, we know that, and if we think we're shielding our clients and our patients and our children from that, they'll be missing some critical brain connections that need to be had. So here's something that recently I was talking to my own little granddaughter about, learning about the pit. It's a metaphor, but you need to, especially when they're beginning to be in school or something that's very difficult that you're trying to explain or do in therapy, make it part of their vocabulary. So something that is very difficult, and then you start hearing things such as, I don't get it, it's too hard. The whining starts. I can't do this. You do it. Oh, uh-oh, who's in the pit? You're in the pit. So let's start to climb out. How do you climb out? Phrases of positivity such as, oh, I think I'm on the right track. Oh, I see you're on the right track. Another phrase could be, I can ask for help. I'll try that again. And paraphrasing them, I see that you're asking for help. I see that you're trying to help, or you're trying again. I like that. And then when they're actually climbing out of that pit, that they can understand, I understand and I didn't get up. So yes, they're going to fall into that pit, but don't allow them to stay there. Give them the encouraging examples of getting out of that learning pit, because we all fall into it. We all have our own pity parties. We need to explain the brain science to our patients, our clients, and our children. Most people, kids included, typically fear failure, but what if a child knew that it actually made their brains grow bigger? So showing this brain picture with the barbell and thinking, oh, whoa, that was hard. Oh, you made the biggest boo-boo, but you just made your brain grow bigger. Whoa, that's fantastic. High five. So if they understand the brain science behind why mistakes improve learning, it's probably a lot easier to get them excited about that prospect. So I do like to teach that. And there's a book I'll show you in just a second that will help encourage that. Here's another one, emphasize failing forward. That simply means learning from your errors. Asking questions like, what did you learn from that? Or, I wonder what you'd do differently next time. In other words, shift the focus onto a more positive aspect of the failure or of the boo-boo or of the mistake, whatever word you want to use. But again, these words need to be in their vocabulary also. Don't eliminate failure, mistake, boo-boo, uh-oh, from their world. Just like the little picture says there, it takes skill to fall upstairs, and I am guilty of that all the time. I seem to not be able to pick my feet up enough, and I fall upstairs. So yes, I have skill. So I understand that, and I didn't give up because I still climb stairs. So we need to also be wary of teaching a mindful approach. This is especially helpful for the children out there that may have meltdowns, those on the spectrum, to understand the link between mindfulness, the getting control of the right now and the resilience, because that's very well documented. With practice, kids can learn to respond to strong feelings about failure, about their mistakes, about not getting their way, about not understanding, rather than simply reacting to it. So having that mindfulness to accept, be aware, and be in the present moment. Um, that can be through teaching meditation. Yoga breathing is wonderful, even at a real simplified level, teaching children some gentle yoga breathing, taking 1 minute out of their day to breathe in, breathe out, squeeze the ball in, let the ball go, coordinate that with breath. These are all easy activities that you can teach in those moments to get them grounded into the mindfulness of now. There's an author, Jessica Cassidy, that writes about the mindful meditation and neuroplasticity. With meditation, your brain is effectively being rewired. As your feelings and thoughts morph towards more pleasant outlooks, your brain is also transforming, making its way through the thought of more default. The more your brain changes from meditation, the more you react differently to everyday life with a sense of calm, compassion, and awareness. And believe me, it takes practice. It doesn't happen overnight. And so, as an adult, I encourage you to practice mindfulness and some gentle meditation, whether you call that prayer, whether you call that deep breathing, whether you call just shutting the brain down for a few minutes, and that's easily done through easy deep breathing. There are lots of wonderful apps too I could tell you about. Headspace is one that is very nice. Let me think. Yeah, Headspace. There's one called Bio Breathing or Relaxia that has some background noises of rainfall or the rainforest or the ocean. All of those just to take you out of your daily stress-filled life, because even though kids may not know the word stress, we're all faced with stress from little bitty on up, and just teaching that as we skillfully try and manage this thing called life is very important for us as adults, and it's very important for us to mirror it for our children and our clients. So using meditation can promote neuroplasticity. And there's a wonderful TED Talks from Sarah Lazar of how the brain can change through meditation, through neuroplastic changes. So you might want to look that up. I found that through Harvard Health, its site. So there, you Google neuroplasticity nowadays, and you may get 100,000 hits. It's unbelievable the amount of research that's going on just with that one word and that one topic. So you could probably fine tune what you're looking for just with a quick Google search. And there's no doubt that meditation with music is certainly calming. I myself am an auditory learner, but also I've learned that music is what calms me down, and it's what I tend to go to in my stress moments, is putting on some music. So learning music can make wonderful changes in the brain. So moving on now, what can we teach our children, our clients? Well, there's things we have control over and those things that we don't have control over. Things that I can control: my behavior, the goals I set for myself, my efforts, learning from my mistakes, taking care of myself, who my friends are, and asking for help. These are easy, concrete things that you could teach even a 3 to 4-year-old. Certainly, when I consider my adults or teenagers that come into my practice, and most likely it's through some sort of trauma event, I always ask them, what are your goals? I need to know what you want out of this therapy, and include them in that part of the process so that they can feel in control. What about the things I cannot control? What others say about me? The things I have to do. I cannot control that I have to get up and go to work. I have to get up and go to work. I cannot control that I have had multiple past mistakes, but I can control not dwelling on them. I cannot control what others think about me. So the children and individuals need to realize you can't control that. Don't dwell on that. I can't control the weather. I cannot control being sick or others being kind. So when individuals, children, our clients can understand that there are things we can control and things we can't, and make a pro and con list, they may begin to realize that they have more say and more control in their life than they might have first believed. So here is a wonderful little sign that I gave the idea to Mary from, I got the idea from the Big Life Journal, and she created one for Talk Tools here, the ABCs of Neuroplasticity. This could be a chart that you laminated and put on the wall, especially when you have clients that have big challenges ahead of them. But as you can see there, we've picked a phrase or a positive thought for every letter of the alphabet, excuse me. Aim for progress. Be brave. Be curious. I think that one's really important. Do your best. Embrace challenges. Fail forward. Grow your brain. Help others. Invent. Just that process is wonderful. Just watching my granddaughter draw and invent things out of nothing just fascinates me. And she is making neuroplastic changes like crazy when she invents things and creates things. Just be yourself. Keep trying. Learn from mistakes. Make a difference. Never give up. Overcome obstacles. Put forth effort. Question old ways. Be resilient, set goals, try something new, use the mindset of not yet. I can't do it yet, but I will be able to do it. Be vigorous, and you may have to explain some of these vocabulary words to kiddos, but they'll get it. Work hard, explore. There's nothing like being outdoors and exploring nature to turn the brain on of a child. Yield results and be zealous. So thank you to Mary Sadie for making this beautiful poster for us. And then again, what happens when someone has a growth mindset? Well, some of these things begin to happen and internalize. They're not afraid to fail. They begin to have a love of learning. They ask for help consistently. They realize that progress takes time, and they begin to settle into knowing that. This is real critical for someone that has a big accident, injury, or process that they have to know it's going to take some time to recover. They get inspired by others. In other words, they see success in others, and that means something. I've had individuals write to me and come to me and say, I observed you do a session in blank blank, and I went back and changed my major to speech pathology. Not only is that terribly humbling and surprising, but I think I've up to about 15 individuals that have told me or written to me that live in state and out of state at this point. So at some point, I must have inspired them to take a look at what their career path was, and that is wonderful. I think I'm actually biased. I think speech pathologists have the best job in the world because we get to change the brain. And next to that, all therapists have the best job in the world. I'm sure OTs and PTs individually think they have the best ones, but as a collective group, I think we all do. Because if you can inspire someone else to be their best, even better. The idea that you can love a new challenge. View mistakes as opportunities. That's that failing forward idea. putting forth effort always. Keep trying until you succeed and learn from feedback. That is when you know someone has a growth mindset over a fixed mindset. And you have certainly done your job, and this should take them well past the time that you may have them in therapy, and well beyond. And again, some of these ideas about neuroplasticity is not just directed for those we have in therapy, although this was geared for those in therapy. This was certainly also geared for those of us raising children and grandchildren, because these are very important techniques. So how do we instill a love of learning in children? And I want to take that further to say a love of learning when you have to relearn something, when you've had a skill and then lost it, such as after a stroke or after a traumatic brain injury or some other devastating illness, after a head and neck cancer. How do you instill the love of relearning or learning? Well, you need to let the individual begin to rediscover or discover interests and passions and provide examples and avenues for them to achieve that. That would be number one, first and foremost. Another one is provide hands-on experiences. Take your learning out into the world. Take it into a functional setting. We always hear, make your goals functional. Well, that's on purpose, because it needs to translate into something that can truly be done. With a child, it may be, if they're learning about sea animals, then take them to an aquarium. If they're learning about different types of animals, then take them to the zoo. That's pretty elementary, but you get the idea on that. Number three would be make learning fun, regardless of what that learning is, or that relearning. Try and make it engaging, whether that's through art or through music, through some sort of academic game that can teach a task. But also, I want to say, provide brain breaks. It's good to practice, 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 but sometimes the brain needs a break. Sometimes you need to get up and jump around and be silly. Get up, jump on the trampoline. Let the adult get up and stretch or walk around, or let's go get a cup of coffee and then come back. So that's what I call our brain breaks. They certainly can be done during a therapy session. I'm not saying you don't want to drive home the point of all your goals during a therapy session, but I remember a long time ago someone saying, why am I so much tired after your session than after my physical therapy session, when they had me on the bike and they had me doing free weights and they had me doing all kinds of stairs, but I'm exhausted when I get home from you? Well, it's because the brain engaging activities I had you do certainly fatigued your whole body more than the physical exercise that particular activity had you do. That's the only thing I could think of at the time, but I think it's true. Number four, I think it's important that no matter where you are in life, you are a role model to someone. So demonstrate your own passions, demonstrate that you can be a role model, that you are good at some things and you can translate that over. I do sometimes tell my adults that say, well, you don't understand. This has never happened to you. And indeed, truly, sometimes I can say, yeah, I did. I did have a traumatic brain injury when I was 10 years old. And that in and of itself, and sharing my experience, may open the door to acceptance and getting them to relate to me better and buy into the process that, yeah, I improved my brain through neuroplastic techniques before I even knew what that was, because the term hadn't been created yet. But certainly using your own passion to excite someone in therapy is a key. Number five might be find out what your individual's learning or your child's learning style is and capitalize on that, whether that's a visual learning style, an auditory learning style. I mentioned I'm more of an auditory learner. I have to write things over and over and over before they stick, yet I can hear someone's voice, or I can hear a music melody or a the phone number combination. Because it's auditory, I compare that to numbers and remember a number. So it's crazy. We have, or kinesthetic. Some people have more of a kinesthetic or touch learning style, but when you can find out your client's best learning style and capitalize on that, that is another way to improve their learning skills. Number 6 is critically important, not only therapeutically, but when raising children and grandchildren. Have discussions, not lectures. Begin with questions of why and how, or what would happen if, rather than lecturing, this is the way it's going to be. I walked 12 miles to school uphill in the snow, those kinds of things. But probing questions, and what do you think would happen if, or how did this particular situation come about, or why do you suppose she reacted that way? Those kinds of discussions rather than lectures will help the learning kick in faster. And of course, be supportive and encouraging with your reasonable expectations, because of course learning comes from experience and doing. That's way back. Think of the Montessori approach with children, which was learning through doing activities. Way back, Leonardo da Vinci certainly didn't know the term of neuroplasticity, but one of his quotes is, "Study without desire spoils the memory, and it retains nothing that it takes in." Think about the last lecture, or heaven forbid, sermon, or meeting you were in as an adult that you absolutely did not key into. Whether or not it was important, whether or not you thought it was engaging, or whatever the situation, if there was not a desire to retain or to engage, be active, to pay attention, well, nothing was taken in, therefore your memory could not take hold of it. So even Leonardo was basically practicing neuroplasticity way back in his time, and didn't he do some marvelous work? And certainly he failed forward, because I know it took a lot of work to even produce one sculpture. So when we think about neuroplasticity in kids, there are 4 ways that take a child through it, and these are more protective past the first one. Adaptive is changes that occur when children practice a special skill and allow the brain to adapt or functionally gain hold of that skill. It's why basically they adapt quicker after an injury. Impaired neuroplasticity would refer to something causing a genetic or acquired disorder. It's not necessarily that someone, for example, with cerebral palsy may learn to walk, but the gait may be impaired because the neuroplastic repetitions of that gait were not a perfectly straightforward walk. So the body fired and wired together to make this impaired gait, but still neuroplastic techniques were in effect. Excessive would refer to the reorganization or new maladaptive pathways that can cause a disability or disorder. Think about someone that may be born and have functional feeding at first, but then maybe there's a tethered oral tissue, and over time develop more of a thrusting swallow, and then open mouth breathing, and then ear infections kick in because of various regions or posturing, or maybe they have Down syndrome, and there's low tone, but because of a maladaptive pathway, maybe the reorganization has created then now an open mouth posture of breathing, of swallowing, of feeding, that is a result of a reorganization or a maladaptive pattern that was just repeated enough time excessively that it sealed the deal. Doesn't mean it can't be changed, but it is something that happens. And then the last one refers to a harmful plasticity pathway that can be formed that make injury more likely, but actually kids can recover from quicker. And you can look up Munker's work in 2005 to read about how he describes these adaptive things. We tend to stay more at the green level, the adaptive level, but the others do exist as well. Now, here's where I want to spend a little bit of time talking about teaching children, whether they are special needs or neurotypical, teaching them about their brain. Most kids love to read books, and if you can point out and show them why their brain is important and how things happen, they may begin to internalize, so that's why I need to do yet one more time, one more time, one more time in therapy, because of how the brain works. So this particular page is out of the book, The Fantastic, I don't know if you can see it from back here, but The Fantastic Elastic Brain. And it goes through teaching each one of those areas. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain that helps you think and speak. So, if your child is there for speech or your client is there for speech, your cerebrum's working. I can almost see it getting bigger with every repetition. The prefrontal cortex is part of the brain that helps you plan and make decisions. The amygdala is tightly wired, a group of cells that helps control your emotions. So sometimes, especially when children have trouble transitioning in and out of therapy, in and out of change, they get happy or sad or tearful or frightened. You can say, oh, that amygdala needs some work. Let's think about this. Identifying those emotions, showing the happy face with a child smiling, the sad face with a child frowning, getting them to understand emotions. And look, it's all the way in your brain. Let's see if we can make your amygdala work better. And then working towards hippocampus for memories, showing that it's like a file cabinet that stores all the things that you have learned. And then the cerebrum as part of the brain that helps you walk and balance so that you can ride a bike and play tag or chase your sister. All of those, I think, are super important to teach kids that especially when they have trouble or difficulty in an area, they can begin to understand the science behind it. And why do I have to do this one more time? I can't do it. I can't do it. Oh, but you're making your brain stronger. I think I see it getting bigger. Your brain is elastic. It can grow. Let's make it strong. So I love this book. Obviously, you can tell I have read it to my granddaughter several times, and she does. She remembers parts of it, and we have to go back over some of it. But I think it's an important thing that you can teach children. Neuroplasticity in adults, again, as I've mentioned, it's not absent. It takes a little harder work. It needs carryover. So it's wonderful when you can have family members and caregivers that'll carry over. So hopefully it'll generalize and have transference kick in. But it's not as fast as in children, and it is at lower strength levels and abilities, but it's still, the adult brain is capable of extraordinary change. I think the first way I noticed it was just through working with patients with Parkinson's and using the Lee Silverman voice treatment protocol. The change that I saw in those patients' attitudes and the facilitated confidence and the way they carried their posture after 16 visits of this hardcore boot camp voice therapy was amazing. They carried themselves bigger and better. They were louder. They came in with confidence. Things that they weren't doing for years, like answering the phone or ordering in a restaurant, was like now a new skill and something that they used to be fearful to do. So yes, it can improve and help and can be done in adults. Certainly, it can restore old or lost connections and functions that may not have been used for some time. And certainly that's why even individuals that have been diagnosed with dementia or memory difficulties, some cognitive skills can be enhanced over time with proper therapy sequences. The potential is there. It's generally not as great in the very older geriatric adults as younger children and young adults, but certainly through sustained effort and lifestyle changes, adults can promote positive changes and growth and changes in their brains. So that should be encouraging, and that's why I teach about it with new patients. So going back to the principles of neuroplasticity, and how does it change? We have to remember to have use and repetition, lots of repetition. A program I could tell you about too that's wonderful for changing the brain is called interactive metronome. It's a way of engaging a motor movement with a sound. The sound is a cowbell. I've used it for years. There's lots of research about it. You can use an effective limb and help someone do hand over hand with it. But certainly to gain changes in the brain, they have found that it takes about 22,000 repetitions. I don't know if it takes 22,000 repetitions to improve one particular skills, but for me to, for example, learn the butterfly stroke when swimming, I would definitely agree it'd take more than that. But the idea is repetition is the key. Then we move to intensity. How intensely is it practiced? Specificity, is it specific to what you're trying to teach or what you're trying to learn? Salience is having that attention and motivation and keyed into that moment in time that you're trying to learn it. So you need to be highly engaged in that moment that you're doing it. The difficulty level needs to be there. If it's always easy, it's never going to get better. And then working towards transference, and so that you can know that you know that you know that you can do it in other situations. And that's the circle of neuroplasticity there. So what benefits? I think we know that there are a lot, but what benefits? Actually, let me go back for just a second. When we're talking about repetitions, let me segue here and show a couple of ideas I had about how do you get repetition, especially with kids or those on the scale of having some sort of disability. I want to show some easy techniques. I have an ice tray with 16 holes. I have an ice cube tray with 14 holes, and actually we tend to have 2 of everything. So 2 of 16, 2 of 14, and then I have a muffin tin that has 12 holes. And as you can see, I've put some things in them. When you don't have the concept of how many, and we have to do a lot of repetitions, well, I'm one that always peruses the dollar store or the Target dollar aisle. Sometimes it's simple things like at Christmas time or after Christmas time when they're trying to get rid of some of the things that they've left over. I try to have 12 to 24 of everything, so that if you're trying to get repetition, and even if there's not great fine motor control, but you can drop a fancy Christmas ring into each tray, no matter what the task is. If the task is creating a sound, if the task is a repetitive movement, if the task is saying a phrase, if the task is voicing, then if you can repeat it times every and drop things physically in, and that's fun for children. They may not know that they're doing it 16 times, but I may say, oh, well, this is a 3 ice cube tray day. So in other words, I'm going to do 3 sets of 16 without them realizing I'm doing that many repetitions. So to give you an example of some of the things we have to throw in and make noise and to physically interact with, or they could wear the rings on their fingers, certainly. but I have a baggie full of dice. So just basically throwing dice that make some nice noise as they drop in. I have seashells, which are nice things to hold and feel the smooth surfaces, and so they can be dropped in. Some of the things I put in my muffin tin. Another great place for character things is going to a cake store. Back when SpongeBob SquarePants was popular, I went and bought 2 packages of 6 of these. These are what would be on top of cake toppers. So I had 2 packs of 6, which made 12, and the idea, if someone chose SpongeBob for their activity dropper inners, then they drop it in, they make noise, but then I say, okay, we have to do 2 muffin trays today, so they know that they have, taking it in, taking it out, taking it in, taking it out. And basically, they've done 48 without realizing they've done 48 repetitions of whatever it is you're trying to do. Also, Mater and the cars. This is a cake topper, so I got 12 of those. Some of those fun erasers at Christmas time. That's a stocking. There's a little Christmas tree, a snowman. These I've had forever. These are my donkey kit. I have a blue, red, and yellow, but I have about 16 donkeys. And so sometimes I like that. Obviously, you can teach ears and hooves and nose and back and mane and tail, and you can teach the primary colors, blue, yellow, red. There's lots of ways to use this. For those that have trouble holding, I would get balls, squeeze balls. These are, they look like Easter eggs, but they're in the shape of little dinosaur creatures or little, this one's a hippo actually, and this one's a toucan, but these are easy grippers for toddlers, and toddlers can drop these in and they make a nice noise. And so dropping it in is 12 times, pulling it out is 12 times, that's 24 repetition. Some of our older kids like the ones that, these erasers that pull apart, the fine motor they have to put back together and then put in. I pulled out the little hamster, cute little telephone. And if you were worried about these falling apart and you didn't want them to be able to dismantle them, I would super glue them shut. And then I have a bug set, which is real popular with the boys. These different bugs that they can hang on to, hold, feel, drop in, and pull out. But a wonderful way to get repetitions. I've even used it with adults to get them to use their non-dominant hand and to drop something such as the dice that was easier to get in a pencil grasp than a marble. And another way to show you is a graph of, for example, in my dysphagia treatment, to make sure I want to get 80 to 100 swallows. Well, I'm tracking every swallow in the McNeil Dysphagia Therapy Protocol, and then I'm graphing and showing them that when they couldn't fathom that they, at the beginning of the session or at the beginning of therapy, they only got 5 swallows, and now, hey, look, you got 52 effortful swallows today out of our total of 76 swallows. So that mathematically proves improvement and change. And it shows repetition, which is what we need, and it's the second key feature in neuroplasticity. So what does some benefits, 7 benefits that I've listed here that neuroplasticity has on the brain? Well, as I've kind of beat home already, recovery from traumatic brain injuries. I unfortunately, in my area, seem to get a lot of this, all ages, neurotypicals that are involved in car wrecks, car train accidents, to one individual even that had such of a severe seizure in Walmart that he fell on the ground, hit his head, and then knocked over an aisle on his head. So you can imagine the trauma his brain suffered from that. Recovery from brain events like strokes. We have had 2 babies recently that had strokes in utero, so it's not, babies are not immune to this, as well as youngsters, young adults, and certainly our older population. So letting someone know, letting a family member know, letting a precious mother know that their child can improve because of this thing called neuroplasticity is something that gives hope, and everybody needs hope. Number three, the ability to rewire functions in the brain, such as an area that's been damaged, then another area can be able to pick up the slack. We've all heard that if someone has a sudden onset blindness, all of a sudden their hearing is heightened, or maybe their sense of touch is heightened because they've lost the sense of sight. Well, that's the brain reorganizing itself because of the necessity of needing to rely more on these other senses. What else can it do? Number four, enhanced memory abilities. You can make your memory better. It's work. You have to work at it through mnemonics, through engaging activities that are difficult, just like every stage that I showed you in that circle. But all of us can improve our memories. And this can help the older adult that has some cognitive decline. And that leads to number five. There's a wide range of enhanced cognitive abilities. I will say I have on my phone and on my iPad, just to name a few. Oh, let's see. I left it in my purse. Let me see if I can grab it real quick. A list of my, of course, I didn't make it handy. Here it is. A list of apps that I have. I mentioned the meditation apps, Headspace, which is a number one, Relaxia, which has the sounds, and bio breathing, which kind of teaches inhalation, exhalation. But Headspace, if you could only do one app, and there's a free version of it. Of course, there's a paid version too, but it will really teach some basic meditation skills. Other apps for brain enhancement, one of the best ones that a speech pathologist can get for free is called Constant Therapy, and it has all different areas of rehabilitation needs. It has language, it has cognitive skills, it has memory, it has attention, it has reading, it has some writing in the sense of pulling, dragging and dropping, because it's not physically writing like a pincer grasp, but dragging and dropping to make a sentence. So Constant Therapy is free to speech pathologists, and then as you tailor and find out what your patients need, they can use that app for 30 days free, and then they can subscribe to it as they need it, month by month, or buy it, I think, like 6 months at a time, something like that. Another wonderful one that I personally use myself is called FitBrains, and FITBRAINS, and within it, it has different areas to practice: memory, attention, cognitive skills, visual skills. I'm not great visually, so I tend to do those. Emotional. So it has several areas and levels of difficulty. You begin with beginner, then intermediate, and advanced. So that when I'm bored or when I get a plane delayed, I will work on FitBrains. And then some other therapeutic for, and again, this is more for older teenage to adult, but certainly all of us need this kind of repetitive work. So FitBrains is one, Constant Therapy. There's one called Peak, P-E-A-K, Elevate, Lumosity, that's got a lot of research behind it, and Mind Games, Brain HQ, that's a subscription one, but I really like that one too. And to tell you about if you're trying to teach specific concepts that are within learning, I like Khan Academy because it will take the art of drawing and explain concepts in chemistry, mathematics, some science, even some medicine. And now there is a Khan Kids, KHANKIDS. And it explains lots of learning concepts to kids through drawing and through these short little segments, and those are all free. Khan Academy and Khan Kids are free. Another way to enhance your brain, of course, is through learning a foreign language, and two of my favorite foreign language apps are the Rosetta Stone ones, but more preferably something called Mind Snacks, because they're absolutely adorably fun. And it you find out that you fail, obviously, and then it teaches you how to get better and better through the repetition. But there's minds, the three that I have on my phone right now are Mind Snacks, French, Italian, and Spanish, since those are the Romance languages, and those are a lot of fun. So those are ones I wanted to talk about when it comes to enhancing cognitive abilities through this neuroplastic ideas and the cognitive research that's behind it. So moving on to number 6 here, losing a function in one area, as I mentioned, like someone that has gone blind may enhance others. That is truly heightened, but we can also encourage someone that maybe never had a good skill in one area because of a developing disability at birth. And number 7, it enhances all learning. So neuroplastic tendencies and techniques can help all children, all adults, all individuals, regardless of their station in life and regardless of what they've been faced with. So, how do we rewire our brain with neuroplasticity? Well, here are some basic ideas that you can begin to shape and create and use in your life and teach to the parents and teach to your clients and patients. And I can let you learn those here, but expanding your vocabulary. I am definitely a word nerd, so I have the dictionary app pop me a new word every day. Dancing. I am a klutz, but in my own world, I dance like nobody's fool when no one's watching. Sleeping, of course, is very critical to brain health. That's why when those of you that can key into some of Robin Merkel Walsh and Lori Overland's work with tethered oral tissue and oral myofunctional disorders and how the airway may be affecting sleep patterns, the more we know, the more we need to know about how sleep may be impacting all learning. So getting better sleep is certainly a brain enhancer. Reading fiction, because our mind will tend to create such important characters and what the characters wore and what they look like in our mind's eye. So reading fiction is very good. Of course, with children, that would be learning to read, learning a musical instrument, traveling simply because you are being exposed to new cultures, new areas that you may not ever thought about, or new ways of doing things, rituals, techniques. When I went to Egypt, I was served a wonderfully light breakfast because lunch wasn't until 5 o'clock. And guess what? Dinner wasn't until 10:30. That was certainly different for my framework around eating, but culturally was appropriate and certainly enhanced my learning because I was exposed to something new. Creating artwork, as I mentioned, my granddaughter is very good at that, but all individuals have some sort of creative output that we can lock into if we begin to think about it. Cleaning up our diets, staying away from junk food, staying away from processed food, everything in a box, getting more to organics when possible, or fresh fruits and vegetables, lean meats, fish, and fowl. Using mnemonic exercises, using programs that engage the brain. All of these are how neuroplasticity can be advanced and enhanced throughout the lifetime, and through expanding the types of things that we want to do for those of us that work with clients as well. So I'm probably ending a little early for some change, although I will show a couple other books as well. So neuroplasticity, it's time for a change because we can change. So as I mentioned, I showed the fantastic elastic brain that I think all of these I think I've gotten through Amazon, but that one is one I possess. Ned the Neuron is a cute one. A Walk in the Rain with a Brain. The Girl Who Heard Colors. Synesthesia is an interesting phenomenon. There's apparently very few individuals in the world that have this, but that basically hear color. I don't understand that. I don't get it, but it is a phenomenon. And that is such a fantastic thing to me to try and wrap my head around, that if you see green and green sounds like, I don't know, a tinkling bell. I don't know exactly how that is in the brain and how it's wired, but that's an interesting book right there. And it's written, of course, here for children. And this other one I listed, You Can't Use Your Brain If You're a Jellyfish, which is a cute one. And then on this page is one more for children, 30 million words, building a child's brain. Tune in, talk more, take turns. So that's written by Dana Sukind, MD. I have read this, The Tale of Doodling Neurosurgeons, which is kind of interesting because it talks about all the freaky, weird stories from early someone getting hit in the brain with a jousting sword and how they somehow recovered, and all these interesting pre-neurosurgery type accidents that led to the science of neurosurgery and neuroscience and neuroplasticity ultimately. The Brain Maker is also written by the author of The Grain Brain, making that gut-brain connection of how important our diet is. They say our gut, or our intestinal area, our digestive tract, is like our second brain. What happens there certainly affects how our everyday activities are and how we feel. So that's kind of an important one, talking about insight in how you heal and improve your life through eating. My Stroke of Insight is a wonderful tale from, or not a tale, it's a true story by Jill Bolt Taylor, PhD. She's a neuroscientist that had a stroke in her 30s, and her description of her own recovery, because for a long while she was only in her right brain because she had damage in her left brain. She totally relearned to talk and walk and everything she had to relearn, but for a while she was only in the here and now. She could not understand anything more than touch and love, and anyone that didn't give her eye contact or immediate right now attention, she had to prune away because she didn't understand it. And it's her insight as a neuroscience scientist of how she came back from that. And it was the love of family basically that brought her out of it, which is a wonderful, wonderful book. The Boy Who Could Run but Not Walk is an interesting book written by Karen Pape, MD, about what she started noticing working with the cerebral palsy population. And this was processes of development after the diagnosis of a cerebral palsy, of maybe a child could learn to walk with a correct gait. However, they tended to resort back to the altered gait because that's how they were reinforced at it before their brain began to use the neuroplastic techniques. So that's an interesting read in and of itself. Turn the Lights On, I've not read, but it's a personal journey about a physician's recovery. The Ghost in My Brain is about a severe concussion and how it stole away the life of this Clark Elliott, PhD, and what he learned and knew about brain plasticity that brought him back out of it. So like I said, if you Google neuroplasticity and a particular topic, you are bound to get thousands and thousands of articles and hits and research papers and things that will lead you down your own path. But certainly as many scientists, as therapists, as clinicians, as parents, we need to understand the positiveness around what neuroplasticity can do for our life. And the more we understand it, the more we can get our children, whether neurotypical or our own children, our own clients, to buy into the fact of, yes, it may be hard work, but the rewards are endless. And that's also why even I have my own bucket list. I want to learn to play guitar and ukulele. I have no clue how to do that, but I know I'm going to enhance my own brain's connections by doing that. And no doubt it's just another goal I've set for myself. So I've had The Brain That Changes Itself. I don't think I had that one included. the brain's way of healing, and I did have the boy who could not walk, who could run but not walk. So certainly start somewhere and encourage, because this is a fantastic thing. This was a wonderful, fun topic to explore. I thought I knew a little bit about it, but I learned and gained a lot more by putting this little webinar together. I hope it's been helpful. So this is my little thank you happy dance. I appreciate your attention. And I do want to leave you with one set of quotes, and then I'll turn it over to some questions. According to Craig Krishna, meditation invokes that which is known in neuroscience as neuroplasticity, which is the loosening of old nerve cells or hardwiring the brain to make space for the new to emerge. Santiago Ramon y Cajal, any man could, if he were so inclined, to be the sculptor of his own brain. That's a pretty cool one. Elizabeth Thornton stated, because of the power of neuroplasticity, you can, in fact, reframe your world and rewire your brain so that you are more objective. You have the power to see things as they are so that you can respond thoughtfully, deliberately, and effectively to everything you experience. Andrew Weil says, among other things, neuroplasticity means that emotions such as happiness and compassion can be cultivated in much the same way as a person can learn through repetition, such as playing golf or basketball, or master a musical instrument, and that with such practice patterns, the activity and physical aspects of the brain areas change. So in other words, you can choose to be happy and choose to have joy in your life. That's pretty powerful. Norman Doidge says, everything having to do with human training and education has to be re-examined in the light of what we know about neuroplasticity. And I think that's key. Now that you know about it, you need to tell others, be encouraging, and move forward. Donald Hebb, this is an oldie but goodie. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Douglas Rushkoff said, brains are tricky and adaptable organs for all the neuroplasticity, allowing our brains to reconfigure themselves to the bias of our computers. We are just as neuroplastic in our ability to eventually recover and adapt. And by Michael Gazzanata, our brains renew themselves throughout life to an extent previously not thought possible. And lastly, Susanna Callahan, our minds have the incredible capability to both alter the strength of connection among neurons, especially rewiring them, and create entirely new pathways. It makes a computer which cannot create new hardware when its system crashes, seems fixed and helpless. So our brains are a fantastic computer with both hardware and software updates that constantly are available. And certainly we need to capitalize and encourage that in those that we work with, those we teach. And back to my happy dance. And now if we have any questions, I will turn it back over to Lisa at the Hub at Talk Tools.
Hi, Colette.
Thank you. Hey.
All right, so for those of you with us, if you have any questions, please type it in the question tab now, and we would be happy to answer your questions. While you're thinking about that, please remember that you will be receiving an email within 1 to 3 business days that will include the recording of today's webinar, your ASHA survey, and your digital copy of your certificate. Also in the email is today's handout and additional resources to keep for your reference. Also, another announcement, we do have a webinar this Friday, so we hope to see you then. We also have a nice lineup of webinars throughout the rest of the year. So you can check that out at talktools.com. But at this time, I still don't see any questions.
Alrighty, that's fine. I hope they take advantage of the handouts and the little reference poster that Mary made. And I don't know. I hope I'm not the only nerd in the audience, but it was fascinating to me to know about the brain. So, and certainly how we can affect change. But I think this webinar coming up Friday with Robin will be fantastic. Those of you that may be listening, so please consider always looking out for our different topics and authors because we have a great lineup.
And of course, if you do have any questions lingering after today, you're welcome to email us. You can email me at continuingeducation@talktools.com, and I'll make sure that Colette gets your questions. So I think we'll just go ahead and close it, Colette.
All right, sounds good.
But thank you so much. As always, it's a pleasure, and we look forward to your next webinar.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate your help.
Thank you.
All right, have a great one.
You too.
Bye-bye.